afternoon. Welcome to GAMA's State of the Industry Press Conference. My name is Andre Castro. I'm the Director of Communications for GAMA. I recently joined at the beginning of the year after spending about a decade on the Hill and in politics, and most recently for Congressman Bill Flores, who out of Texas, who is a GA pilot and enthusiast. We have a packed schedule for you today. First, we're going to start out with announcing our 2019 billing and shipment numbers. Then we will go on to release a economic impact study on general aviation for the U.S. economy. After that, we'll have a panel discussion with industry leaders, and then followed by a Q&A session. After that, we'll have a couple of brief announcements regarding GAMA's 50th anniversary, as well as the Arsenal of Democracy 75th World War II commemorative flyover. At this time, I'd like to welcome GAMA's Chairman and Jet Aviation President, Dave Paddock, and GAMA President and CEO, Pete Bunce, up to the stage.
Well, thanks everyone for having me here today. It's an honor to be chairman of General Aviation Manufacturers Association. Also pleased to represent Jet Aviation's 4,500 people in 49 locations around the world. We're going to brief you on the shipments for both piston and turbine-powered airplanes as well as rotorcraft. I'll start with piston airplane shipments. So what you can see from the numbers is that piston shipments have increased by 16.4%. This is the largest number of units shipped since 2008, and a reasonable portion of this growth was from the training market. From a historical context, GAMA is celebrating its 50th anniversary as an organization, and over that time has seen more than 250,000 piston airplane shipments. Moving on to billings. Piston airplane billings have increased 20.2% from 2018, with a total of $772 million, in also the highest in a decade. Moving on to market share, North America, as once again with the largest market share, was 66.4%, and for the fifth year in a row, the Asia-Pacific market is second, which highlights the demand for pilot training in that geographic region. From a turbine perspective, turbine airplane shipments were down relative to 2018 with 525 turboprop airplane shipments. But it's important to note that turbine airplane shipments are our most stable market segment year over year, moving between 450 and 650 shipments per year. Turboprop airplane billings follow a similar trend, and there were $1.7 billion in turbine or turboprop airplane billings, also a modest decrease from 2018. From a market share perspective, 50% of the market is outside of North America, with Latin America being the second largest market, followed by the Asia-Pacific region. And then finally, moving on to business jet shipments. Business jet shipments are up 15.1% with 809 units. This was the highest number of business jet shipments since 2009, with 874 units shipped in 2009. From a billings perspective, billings also increased by 16.7% at $21.1 billion. And you'll note that while unit deliveries is the highest in a decade, billings for 2018 were slightly less than the 2014 to 2015 timeframe, and the next slide shows you why. The light, medium, and large weight segments all moved in a positive direction in 2019, which helped increase total billings. But note that 2014 and 2015 had very robust deliveries of the mid to large business jets, while small jet deliveries were at a relative low point. And then from a market share perspective, the North American market is the significant share of the overall global marketplace and has been growing ever since GAMA first started collecting these statistics in the mid-2000s. And I'll hand off to Pete to address helicopters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But before I start, I have to get something off my chest. Being a owner of the team that won the first two Super Bowls, I'm getting a little tired of all of this stuff, and this being put on the podium just caps it. So Ed, Jack, Mike, and of course, Mr. Cooling, I know you were behind this, so okay, good on you guys. Mahomes is incredible. Okay, congratulations. There you go. Okay, let's move on to rotorcraft. We're hitting some headwinds in the rotorcraft market. On the piston side of the house, this was not unexpected. So we all know that there's one great OEM that produces most of the piston aircraft on the rotorcraft side, and he had predicted at the end of 2018 that 2019 was going to be a tough year. So we're down about 37.6% with those aircraft, and obviously if you look over on the next slide in the billings, that we're down almost identically in the dollar values for those products. If we turn to the turbine side, not as dramatic, but we're still down with the delivery of a decrease of about 8.36 or 8.3%. Note on this slide, just so you all can compare apples to apples, one thing is if we look over the last decade, we're actually looking at the inclusion of the rotorcraft data. But the light shaded area there is for Leonardo that will give us their numbers next month. So we will add those to the total so you can get an apples to apples comparison. When we move from the shipments over to the billing side, and you look, we're down about 11% on the turbines. Okay, and now if we move on and we talk about a very important aspect of our market. First of all, I want to say to all of us in this room, we all played a role in meeting the ADS-B mandate. And it was a joint effort with our partners in the FAA, but all of us in the industry working, manufacturers, customers, our great partners at AEA, and Mike's team to be able to get this over. We've still got aircraft that are in the queue that are being equipped, but just like in Y2K, the world didn't stop when we hit 1 January. We still have a mandate moving forward in Europe, and we'll continue to have mandates moving forward. But those of us that fly with ADS-B and see the safety enhancements that we're getting by seeing traffic out there that sometimes we just didn't pick up with our eyeballs, we can attest right there to the great capability that has. And we're only scratching the surface of what services can be provided, especially with being able to pump through the UAT frequency network and be able to give us additional data. Like today, I don't fly unless I have weather, if there's convective activity out there. 10 years ago, you wouldn't even thought about it. Now, I've got to have it because it is a safety enhancer, and it has definitely saved lives. So Mike's team over at AAA has reported to us that they had a very robust year. If you look at the retrofit market, in there a little over 55%, forward fit about 44%, for a really strong and robust year of $3 billion. And that increase, as they've been tracking it, that has been consistent now for 3 years, 12 consecutive months. And I think, Mike, you started tracking back in 2012, and this is the best year. So congratulations to our great partners there at AEA. So if we look at our entrance into service last year, this is pretty impressive. These are aircraft that came into the marketplace in 2019 across the spectrum. And so we all know that this industry is moving forward. Great investments put into new technology to be able to deliver these quality products, each that are much safer and more efficient than their predecessors from each one of our manufacturers. So that ties in directly to what I would like to talk about next, and that is specifically the contributions to the U.S. economy for general aviation. Our great partners are with us. I got Ed Bolin from MBA, Tim Ovitz, the head of NATA, Jack Pelton, the head of EAA. Mike is here again from AEA, and I'm trying to see our other, I think, HAI. Ed, where are you? Ed DeCampley? Okay, so Ed, we must be missing him. So we all know, one, we want to welcome Tim to the President CEO job there. Jim Viola just took over at HAI. So we issued this type of report. We do this every 5 years. So the last time that we issued it, if you recall, was back in 2015, and it took 2013 data. So if we look now, what PricewaterhouseCoopers did for us is they went and they did a deep dive last year using 18 data, which then we release here in 2020. So if you look at the jobs that are supported by general aviation, so this isn't all just direct jobs, whether they're in our factories or directly working for our FBOs and the whole network, that's a significant number, and it's an increasing number. So if you want to round up and you're using it as a soundbite when we're talking to folks on the Hill, you know, 1.2 million jobs out there and $250 billion in the U.S. economy, that is pretty good news. And what we will do as associations, if you remember last time in 2015, we handed out a compendium called the Wide Wings and Rotors of General Aviation. And what we did is we tried to apply context and color to these numbers and show stories about how our industry just permeates every part of the U.S. economy. We are all going to do that again. Our teams are working on it right now, and very soon that you're going to see. So whether you're out there working on a home built or working in one of our factories, out there on the flight line, or you're ones that are going to training at one of our great training centers and you're spending money in the economy, in that local economy, it's a giant contribution. And we should all be very proud of it and talk to those that are influencers up on the Hill and in our local communities about this great industry and what it does for the U.S. economy. So thank you to my buddies, all from our sister associations, for helping us get this over the line. This is a big deal. And why is this a big deal? Because the best is yet to come. Look at what is ahead of us right now. You look at these entrants all across the board on traditional aircraft, rotorcraft, pistons, turbines, all out there. There are great development programs in the pipeline that we're going to see in the very near future. And then, now think about what's next, about this new revolution in aviation. And as a lot of you have heard me say before, this has to be like the time was at the dawn of the jet age. We have all of these companies working on these new types of vehicles using electric, some hybrid propulsion, and it is going to literally change our world. And it is going to happen faster than people realize. There are a lot of naysayers out there that are the policy wonks and everything, but I'm telling you, if you go out there and you see the money that's coming into this industry right now, people, and this is not what we've seen traditionally in our industry over the last couple decades, that it's coming from outside the U.S. There is tremendous amount of investment in U.S. capital, but also some very exciting partnerships that you've seen develop and have been in the news last few weeks with automotive manufacturers that also see this as their future, and the bets that they're making on what we as an industry are going to be able to do with this type of technology should give you confidence that it is real and it is going to happen. So I'm so very excited about what's happening with our entire industry as we look to that future. And that is why certification becomes so very important. Now, we all know that it has captured not only the industry, but captured the mainstream press, not only in this country, but across the ocean for the last year, looking at what happened with the MAX. And our hearts and our sympathies go out to the families with the MAX, but in the dialogue that has been created, especially by news entities that aren't familiar with our industry, there is just a lot of misreporting. When people start talking about self-certification and that they have no idea about how intricately involved and integrally involved the FAA is in each and every step of the process. And you're going to hear a little bit about that later today. But what we did is we created a chart because we can't go up on the Hill, and those of you that work the Hill know that you got to distill everything down to an elevator speech of a few seconds. You cannot take a complex system like certification and make it into an elevator speech. In fact, an hour and you're just scratching the surface. The other day, Walter DeRocher, our head of engineering, gave me a term, and I've been at GAMA now 15 years, and I had never heard of that specific issue before, so I'm still learning all the time. But what we did is we took and created this chart to show in the shaded areas just how FAA is involved in every step of the process. And why is delegation so important in that process? Because if we don't delegate to experts that are out there in the industry that are overseen by the FAA, we are not able to refresh our products and make them safer. If we draw this process out longer and have longer cycles between new products entering into the system, it is not as safe as if we employ smartly delegation that's not only used here in the FAA, but it's used with all the other leading authorities in the world, ANAC in Brazil, Transport Canada, and EASA, which are our main bilateral partners. And so that relying on each other's competencies in safety becomes absolutely paramount, but each one of them employs a degree of this type of oversight mixed in with the delegation, and that's also how we free up resources to be able to devote to new entrants that aren't long-standing manufacturers that have this organization designation authorization, ODA, so that they can go and bring product to market. So you can talk to any one of those new entrants that I showed you on a previous slide here. They have to rely on FAA experts to be in their factories, working with them to be able for the FAA to understand the technology so that the FAA can learn and give the proper interpretation of the rules to that company so they can move forward. And that's the only way the system works, and delegation is vitally important to that. So we are making our engineering team available to any members of the press before the President's reception tonight at 5 p.m. over at the Four Seasons to walk through this chart and answer any questions, because really we have to rely on you as our experts to communicate with the mainstream press about how vitally important delegation is to safety. And the reason we enjoy this unprecedented level of safety today in civil aviation is because of the system that has developed over time, and Congress has been our partners, and we are always in favor of making the system better. And that's what we're working on with Congress to do now. And I think that you'll see some of the fruits of that dialogue, and I think Congress definitely wants to be constructive in this process of moving delegation forward. So with that, I would like to ask my chairman if he would get ready to moderate a panel, and I would ask my panelists to come on up. David Khalil, the head of Bombardier Business Aviation; Michael Moftano, the head of Embraer Business Jets; David Van Langenberg, head of Lux Aviation, on all their operations there; Ron Draper, the president and CEO of Textron Aviation; Brad Motir, who has the business aviation, all of the elements within GE that have been working in the general aviation front. So with that, Mr. Chairman, would you take it away?
Thanks, Pete. We've done this format for the past couple of years, and I think you're going to find this engaging. Obviously, we have a very esteemed group of professionals here that are leaders within the business and general aviation industry. We're going to touch on a couple of topics that are relevant. We're going to talk about certification, safety management systems, sustainability efforts, workforce development. Each of the people up here is a leader in their own respect, either within GAMA or within their own companies on one of these issues. So we'll start first with Ron Draper and the importance of delegation. Pete touched on it earlier, but there's a lot of focus on the FAA certification process and the use of delegation. And that's so important to improving aviation safety by incorporating advanced technology into future aircraft and other systems. So Ron, can you discuss how the FAA is involved in the certification process with Textron?
Sure, absolutely. Pete did a great job of teeing up the topic. You know, I could use our most recent example. We just certified a super mid-sized Part 25 jet last year after 4.5 years through the process. And the certification process with the FAA on this jet was the most rigorous certification process on any airplane we've done in our history, and we've done quite a few airplanes. The folks that talk about delegation, maybe that's not even the right word to use, but those that are outside the industry and point to this as a problem, I don't really understand the whole certification process. It's not really a delegation. The entire process is managed and controlled by the FAA. If you take our example, in our Wichita engineering office, the ACO office, they've got about 50 people there. And while I would like them to be working on our products every day, of course they're working on other products there as well. They provide the approval from everything from the certification plan at the beginning, the agreement on the cert standards at the beginning, all the way out throughout the process to ensure we're meeting certification on every individual system, from the structure to every mechanical system of the airplane. Sometimes on a system, they retain all approval in a traditional cert process, and sometimes they say, well, this is the 4th time you've done this hydraulic system and it's not changed from the last one. You still have to do all the testing and show us the reports, but we let you do that work. And so we have, we will have 200 ODA members compared to the 50 at the Wichita office. Without that level of cooperation and back and forth where they set the standards and we go meet them and prove them, product development would grind to a halt in the industry. It simply would not happen. There's not enough manpower. So the FAA orchestrates this like a conductor from the entire process, and we have to show compliance on every system, every safety aspect of the airplane. And so the bar gets raised. It's constantly getting raised. And I would say anybody that thinks that process doesn't work, probably ought to talk to some of the OEMs that go through that process. It's a very, very rigorous process. And I think the safety data, of the industry and of, OEM aircraft out there proves how well that process has worked. It just gets safer and safer throughout the process. So I think the certification process, of course, there's always room for improvement. And I think a productive dialogue or debate on tweaking this or improving this absolutely should be had. But I think it's from my perspective, kind of silly to talk about, and maybe those voices are getting quieter, but to talk about throwing out the whole system or the whole process and starting over. To me, that would be a big mistake.
That's great. Thanks for that feedback. In a similar vein, we're going to talk about certification and also safety management systems. So Pete talked about GAMA's commitment to supporting the overall certification process and improving the process where necessary. So we're working with Congress, FAA, other aviation stakeholders to improve that certification process, including the use of safety management systems. So moving to Brad, I know that GE was an early adopter of safety management systems in the design and manufacturing environment and found benefits. And just like you to share with the group what those benefits have been.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Dave. And I'm glad we have so many people interested in safety management and certification and all. So safety management system is really a process that we have at GE. There are 2 large OEMs that are recognized with safety management systems by the FAA, just 2. It's not mandated, so it's a voluntary system. A lot of people have them, 2 are recognized. And what safety management system, the objective is to take safety and what we do and think and act around safety from a transactional event into a continuous process across the whole organization. So for GE, that includes having a separate safety organization that reports up to an independent chief engineer's office. It involves having safety product management teams that are cross-functional across the business that are looking at the safety aspects, the risks of the products, events, investigations, forward-looking metrics and things like that. Compiling that, those teams meet on a regular basis, and then every quarter there is a high-level review of safety, the whole safety program across GE Aviation. And those meetings are attended by vice presidents, corporate officers, so it's taken very seriously, and it's really establishing a consistent safety culture across the business, not just looking at safety as a transactional activity, maybe because there was an event out in the field.
So I know safety management systems are broadly used in flight operations and other areas. So NTSB, for example, I think is a big supporter of safety management systems. How are you using the data that you're deriving from your safety management systems within GE to help improve your overall operations?
Sure. So I think one of the interesting things that we do is we involve our customers in the safety management system process. So we take the data that we've collected, we merge it with their data that they have from fleet experience, and we meet and talk about how is the product as a system. Our product is just a piece of the engine, a piece of the aircraft. How is our product working in the system to enhance safety out in the marketplace? So that's an example of how we try to extend just beyond our four walls.
That's great. Super. Thanks, Brad. Appreciate that. Now, moving on to Europe. David, close to both of our
Yes.
hearts. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
So we recently set up the European Leaders Steering Committee. You've taken on the challenge of chairing that committee. Thank you very much for that. So what's the focus in Europe? What's the tone in Europe? And what are the priorities that you see developing?
Being part of, as Lux Aviation, being part of the GAMA Association, we felt it's very important to get the attention of the European key decision makers and the regulators. And because we all see Europe and we know the EASA system. What people tend to forget that today, if you look at the website, there are 31 member states in EASA. Used to be 32, I don't know what happened there, but 31 today. That means that it's not one EASA system. You might think so, but you know as well, Dave, that you're talking to 31 different national authorities with their opinion. They look at things. And there's a strong need to standardize and to harmonize more and more. And ELS, the European Leaders Steering Committee, has been very effective to get that to the attention of EASA. We actually had one of the meetings recently with GAMA at the EASA headquarters office with EASA members participating. So it's really great to do that.
So I'm recently moved to Basel. I see what's happening in Europe firsthand. So from a business aviation acceptance perspective, I mean, what's your perception of acceptance, EASA, overall regulatory environment for business aviation particularly?
It's a challenge, and it's not getting easier today. We know with the social climate about flight shaming and et cetera. But it's important to share and exchange with the authorities the challenges that we have. And there are many, especially on licensing and stuff, and getting aircraft registered. It's again one EASA system, but depending on which country you operate and you transfer an aircraft from one country to another, it can take from a couple of days up to several weeks to get an aircraft transferred, and that's just one example.
Yeah. So I think you can't improve things if you don't measure. So I know you have a survey initiative ongoing,
which is really important, and Brad was pointing out how important data is, but it's remarkable in Europe that the most, let's say, basic or essential data, just knowing how many aircraft and how many flight hours we have, was a very difficult thing to know. So we were very happy with GAMA to work together with AOPA and to raise the survey, which was a big success last year. So more than 6,000 general aviation operators or pilots, they answered, which does not include business aviation aircraft, so really grassroots pilots, which is great. And then they tracked and they gave all the flight hours, and that gives us really data that we can discuss with EASA and start to have a discussion about how safe flying is in Europe.
That's great. Yeah. Well, I think that data is going to help all of us in industry. Obviously, EASA is a significant regulatory body and a growing portion of both type validation, STC validation, and others.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, thanks for your feedback. Now, moving on to the environment and sustainability. David Khalil has chaired our environment committee at GAMA for a number of years, starting with the sustainable alternative jet fuel and a number of other initiatives. So, David, GAMA and a number of other business aviation stakeholders have established a number of sustainability initiatives to highlight general aviation's efforts to reduce the environmental impact. What are the steps that we've taken as an industry thus far and those that are upcoming?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. You can't turn on the TV or look at a news channel without seeing that the environment is front and center, and specifically how they're highlighting what they believe are industries that are not kind of leading the way to kind of reduce CO2 emissions. One thing I want to state is that it's collectively, we are one industry that is committed to the reduction of CO2 emissions for our industry, and we're taking proactive steps to do that. And I think it's super important because I work with all of you on this, and I'm very passionate about this topic, that we need to get that message out that we are one of the few doing it. A great example is what Jet Aviation did for Davos. They made SAF available, sustainable aviation fuel available for customers to be able to kind of make their trip to that event. Drop-in ready. It's really leaning forward to demonstrate to the world that we are one of the few industries that have measurable goals in the fight for CO2 reductions. Leading this committee, it's been a great experience for me because the technical things that this industry does is amazing. 40% fuel efficiency improvements in 40 years. We are only 2% of 2% of worldwide emissions, 0.04%. Yet we get the most kind of black eyes when it comes to our emission profile. We have done, you saw what Pete showed, the economic benefits we provide our nation, our countries of origin, and the world is dramatic. The technology we bring, the infrastructure and operations. So for me, it's very important that we kind of get this message out that we are leaders in the industry and one of the few to have measurable goals and objectives that we're working towards. Some of the things that Dave asked me to talk about, over the last several years, we have had a very systematic approach for looking at technology advancements, infrastructure operations, market-based measures, and the use of SAF, sustainable aviation fuel. Since 2018, we got the message out that SAF is ASTM approved and drop-in ready. It's safe for flight, it looks, smells, tastes, don't drink it, like Jet A. The plane doesn't know the difference. In 2019, we had 4 demonstration events from Van Nuys to Farnborough to E-Base to NBAA to show all of us collectively brought our planes, we made the investment in the fuel to kind of show the world that our aircraft, and we flew in them to show safely that we can operate these aircraft. In 2020, it's a super exciting year. We have almost 5 events lined up to demonstrate and continue the outreach to show the world that this is something that's going to be readily available. And what we have to do is go through the education phase, the demonstration phase. So now it's like real-time adoption. And what I tell everybody is if you're an owner-operator or if you're an OEM, make the investment, buy the fuel, put it on your field, put it in the tank, and demonstrate to the world that you are walking the walk. And that's what all of us are doing. So I'm super proud to have a chance to lead this committee and super proud to be with people that are passionate about this. And I think that 2020 is a very important year for us to continue this outreach and demonstrate to the world that we are the one industry leading the charge for CO2 reductions.
So I know we have an event coming up in March.
Correct,
here in
yeah.
DC.
So March 24th, it's a coalition event, GAMA, NBAA, NATA, basically Business Aviation, Sustainable Aviation Fuel Summit. So very exciting to get everybody together to kind of continue this outreach, and you're all invited, and I think it's very important that all of you in the industry continue to kind of be ambassadors of this topic to make sure the world knows what we're doing.
Yeah, from a jet aviation perspective, what I've seen is there still needs to be education with operators of airplanes. As you mentioned, we put 165,000 liters of fuel into Davos, and the question we got from all of the operators that took that fuel is it safe? They were going back to the OEMs, what's the impact on my warranty for my engine or my airframe, these types of things. So there's an education campaign, and I think that's going to grow over time.
Yeah. If you look inside the AFM, usually the AFM has a reference to if it's an ASTM spec, it's drop-in ready. So we need to get that message out because even sophisticated operators are still asking those basic questions. So we still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. And in addition to sustainable fuel, I know book and claim, carbon offsets, these types of other mechanisms are in place as well where the supply isn't available.
Exactly. And that's something in 2020 that for operators above a certain threshold of flying need to kind of get in that process for doing that. So we're working to educate our customers when they take an aircraft that they can get inside these kind of carbon offset programs.
Okay. And David, from a European perspective? Sorry, Mike.
Well, no, I'm as excited because we are privileged the discussion between a member of the European Commission and a director of DG Move Transport. And GAMA is hosting also in the month of March a roundtable in Europe where European Commission will participate and also industry leaders will join that meeting. And it's also very encouraging that also the petrol industry, the industry itself that produced the product will be part of it, and that's good to know.
That's great.
The other thing I'd like to add is that it's beyond the fuel. I think what's happening in the exciting technologies associated with sustainability and how you need to have a tree of life theory that allows for you to look at the products that are being used to make the airplane. And so we're going beyond just the commitment we've made to the industry that David's outlined regarding sustainable aviation fuel, and you start focusing much more about how is the airplane being built. So the metals that are being used. So as an example, you take aluminum, copper, and nickel, you create a new billet, and that billet can now be brought onto the aircraft in a decorative manner to the aircraft's interior. Using wool and bamboo in terms of the interior products. This is coming from upcycle and recycle technologies. And when you look at that, it's more of a tree of life theory that allows for us to start to talk about renewables and having second lives and additional lives to the products that are in the aircraft. And I think that changes the narrative. So it's not just only the commitment we've made to being sustainable in our fuel and our carbon offset and footprint, but also how are you using products to make your aircraft. And the Proterra, which is leading the way, as David said about how the industry has to lead the way in the sector, is launched for the Praetor 600, and it is made from those sustainable materials. We use, as an example, a Japanese, for the samurai swords, have a product called Makume Gain, which takes those aluminum, copper, and nickel products, creates a new billet, and that's exactly the same kind of technologies that you saw in decorative swords in that day. Very exciting to see the technology enter into all aspects of the aircraft.
And one step further is the fact that even the footprints of our factories, LEED certified facilities in Quebec, we have the beauty of hydropower electric that powers all of our facilities being renewable source of energy. So to Michael's point, taking it all the way from the way the factories are run to the way the aircraft are built and to the way they are operated, that message needs to become more holistic, that we're one of these industries that's really forward thinking in the way that we're approaching a long-term sustainable vision for what we do.
That's exactly.
So from you're building product, you're building engines, Brad, you're building airframes. What are the types of product developments that you're willing to talk about today to support sustainability? Design improvements, efficiency gains?
Well, I think we touched a little bit on data, big data, and learning more about how the aircraft is flown and what's the health of the aircraft on a fleet-wide basis, not just on an individual operator basis, is critical. And we're working with Bombardier on that. They're refleeting their entire fleet with a data collection system so that they can now monitor the fleet, but then as an individual operator, you can now say whether you're operating the aircraft efficiently or not. Are there some trends in certain parts of the world that we need to be aware of to be ahead of potential issues? So we're very much focused on data and how to use that data in the marketplace.
What's interesting about all that, David, is that all these areas are all about technology and how technology leads to sustainability. So it's an example of how the advancements of all of our companies are using data and technology to serve the Earth and a sustainable future for our industry.
And that's one thing I think a message is that we're an industry of innovation. And it's not just, when you look at the aircraft and how beautiful they are, the aerodynamics, propulsion, but when you think about the system aspects of the aircraft and where, as Brad mentioned, the ability to get this amount of data in the hands of operators to help them make the plane more efficient is going to be, I think, very compelling for the next decade.
Absolutely.
Great, thanks. So now moving on to workforce. I know this is something, Michael, you're passionate
Very
about.
much so.
Michael's leading the communications committee for GAMA. He's much better than the last guy who was in that role. But so as you look at workforce and the need for workforce and the ability to develop workforce across the industry, just share with us some of your thoughts about what we can do as an industry and as individual participants.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. As David mentioned, I'm privileged to be the chair of the Communication Committee, and the initiatives regarding the Communication Committee really center around the crux of workforce development as the key goal and objective for 2020. And we're very excited about it because it's an industry-wide initiative that allows for all of us to sort of get behind it. And it's involving trying to bring new, diverse talent to the industry. And it's not all about pilots. It's all segments of the industry. So manufacturing jobs, engineering jobs, technology jobs, electrification. These are high-paying, skilled labor jobs that we're looking to seek in a very diverse talent and pool. So the committees that are, the members of the committee are very focused on this development. Some of the work that we have been doing, you have seen from prior years, which is our video series. We have a video series that's on the GAMA website that allows for our member companies to showcase job profiles This gives us a chance to educate the community on it's not just factory line workers riveting airplanes together, that there's all types of fantastic job opportunities, and our member companies have the chance to showcase each one of these job profiles, educating the community through these video series. And we do those throughout the year, and we have a whole series of those planned for 2020. A second initiative is our jobs board. So now the member companies are looking for ways to post jobs that will attract young talent, diverse talent, and talent from all schools that will serve this sector. And it allows for the member companies to post those jobs, and that's on our GAMA website, Aviation Jobs Board. This allows us to flow traffic, and a YouTube channel will continually be updated to provide sort of this digital outreach and social media aspect. But most critically for 2020 is we're proud to announce that we have aligned and associated very formally and have a partnership with the Airline Pilots Association, ALPA. And they have a fantastic initiative called Aviation Works for You. And this is an example of how education used as a resource will allow for the professional career development across all aviation sectors. And it showcases as well the associations across the industry looking out as an outreach to other stakeholders so that we're all in this together. It's not business aviation or airlines or just for pilots. The entire community has to come together, and this initiative is a great showcase opportunity, so GAMA was very thrilled to have the opportunity to do that. It is an initiative that is led by ALPA. We are associated with that to allow for growth for career development, so there's an educational curriculum opportunity. It allows for professional showcasing of careers. And these careers can be airline pilots or private pilots. It could be air traffic controllers, operators, all aspects of the production cycle for the industry, and we're very excited to be a part of it.
Ron, what are the things that Textron's doing to attract your workforce?
Sure. You know, as a U.S. manufacturer, I know this is a global problem, but I think it's an acute problem in the United States, not unique to aerospace. I think the highly skilled labor, the tradesmen of the world, those are coming harder and harder to come by, and it's affecting all industries. For us in Kansas, but just every state in the union. And we're experiencing all kinds of creative new ideas. Some of this, though, is going to be relearned. If you go back, you know, our industry, other industries, we had to go grow our own technical talent. And we had training programs and apprenticeship programs and partnerships with technical colleges, all this stuff. It's still out there, but this industry has, let's face it, has been down for 10 years, and there wasn't a lot of hiring of those machinists and electricians and avionics technicians, and now there's a greater demand for those. And we have a perception problem a little bit just in manufacturing that maybe the parents of today, you know, don't think about recommending to their young person to go in to do those jobs. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of industry groups, and GAMA is one of them, trying to change that image. Locally, what we're doing ourselves is, you know, we're opening up our factories to schools, from grade schools on up, to get the kids in to see these are not the jobs they were 20, 30, 40 years ago. These are exciting, high-tech jobs. And we've set up partnership programs. For example, high school kids now in our home state can get certification certificates, dual credit in high school, and graduate high school with a certificate as a composites technician or avionics technician and go to work the next day. And of course, we're expanding our partnerships with the technical colleges and standing up our apprenticeship programs. We're expanding our military outreach. All of this to how do we find or develop and grow ourselves that future highly skilled workforce that we're going to need.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. We experience the same thing globally, but you know, what do you see in Europe, Dave?
It's very similar. There's a big effort that needs to be done in attracting the workforce and young people to come to the business. And out of the European Leadership Steering Committee, we're more than happy to use the good work and the knowledge done by GAMA and the Communication Committee, because there is something very wrong in Europe, which is They're so proud in EASA they created a wonderful, very good, very efficient, very high-level requirement for training and aircraft maintenance engineers. It is so good that nobody wants to do it.
Yeah.
And that is a big issue. If you find somebody who wants to do it and you do an interview, then the kid will end asking, so where will be my office, my desk, and will I get a cell phone? And that's for somebody who is certified to change an engine or a wheel on an airplane. So there is something wrong, and that we need to urgently bring to the attention of the regulators.
Yeah, we experience the same thing. What David's talking about is a certification process for EASA technicians, B1s and B2s, that could take as much as 6 years to go through before you can have certifying staff signing off an airplane.
We had an interesting, if I can share it with an interesting, a party of European Commission coming over, hosted by GAMA, and there was just a young technician in the building, and we could show the audience that young engineer had as many years of training than the nurse that might save their lives once, you know, and that is something that needs to be think about.
And Dave, if I can, I think it's important that workforce development is like, you need to take a long-term view. And when I had the pleasure of working and living in Wichita, now in Montreal, and I've seen the aerospace clusters, and having those connections with the technical colleges, with the four-year colleges, having outreach programs. I mean, those are the most important things you can do, is build a network of relationships where people have that ability to come in and see what you do over time. So, a long-term view is what we have to take for workforce development, even though we go through some cycles, is keep those clusters intact, keep those outreach programs going, so when you have the great times, they're there, and then when you have the retraining times, that it's all still there, so it's kind of this ecosystem that never goes away. And need to expand it.
David, at long-term view, it means you have to go beyond the universities. You start looking at the high schools, looking at STEM education programs, and you're really trying to look for opportunities to create co-ops, mentorships, internships, where they can see at a much earlier age the curriculum and the job opportunities that align with the curriculum. Very exciting to see, and I agree, long-term view.
So, and I think we're all lucky to work in this fascinating industry. I love going to work every day. It's not even work. But I think the big challenge is, how do we attract people into that? So we have the Aviation Design Challenge.
We do.
GAMA started that in 2013, so maybe talk a little bit about that.
It's the 7th year. We're very excited about the challenge, David. It's for those that are not familiar with the Design Challenge, GAMA has, with its member companies, has the opportunity to sponsor youth, and that youth is for high schools. We've had students from 43 different states contribute. This year, there's 81 schools that are part of the 7th annual event. They receive the curriculum, which is a fly-to-learn curriculum that is provided by GAMA in January. So the schools are all at work right now trying to review that curriculum. This challenge is regarding flight and aviation, and it allows them to design an aircraft. And we have 2 member companies, Glass Air and Redbird, who are sponsors for the prizes. And the 2 prizes for Glass Air, it's a 2-week program from design to taxi, which allows them to actually build an airplane, which is very exciting. And then they go down to Redbird for flight simulation. They have a STEM lab camp. Very exciting programs. We congratulate both of our sponsor companies to do that, and we encourage other member companies to invest in this program to help youth look for opportunities to see the exciting aviation industry from the point of view that we all did when we grew up, looking up and be excited about flight.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you all for your contributions today. It's been fantastic. I think we're going to open it up to Q&A.
Thanks, David.
Yeah.
Well, we had an opportunity this morning. We had our 10th annual leadership review group that was over at FAA headquarters, and we had the administrator, the deputy administrator, the head of aviation safety, head of CERT, head of flight standards, and other folks that are with us. And one thing, whenever I communicate with them, that they just say, how many other industries can enjoy what you guys have? And you just got to see an example of that, where we have captains of industry, all fierce competitors out in the marketplace, but these gentlemen and all of the men and women in our industry working together. My sister association, all these guys, they're my friends, and this industry is unique, and we ought to all take pause and just say, thank goodness we're in it. We're in it because of the people, And it's a global industry, and it's just so exciting. And when you hear these common views shared and the cooperation that goes between our members, other industries don't get to share that. So always keep that in mind. So with that, as we look back at the economic impact study, we do have a representative from PricewaterhouseCoopers here. And sir, thank you. And any discussion that you want to have afterwards on our economic impact study, I encourage you to talk to him to get some context with the numbers. And thank you for the work that you guys did with us. So with that, I'd like to open it up for questions.
Thank you. Matt Thurber, AIN. And just want to say, Pete, we're here because we love you. That's the main reason. Now, my question is, it looks like the industry as a whole is working together better, the ALPA partnership, et cetera. So do you think that the other elements of the industry, like the airlines, et cetera, understand that if they push this user fee idea to the finish line, that they're going to choke down the industry that gives them all their personnel?
Well, Matt, that discussion on privatization and user fees is the gift that keeps on giving. But one thing when I talk to my colleagues here and go, well, it keeps us employed too. You know, if the issue was solved, we'd have that one out of the way. But if you look, there's some recent examples up north of the border in Canada where you've got some airlines that are pretty unhappy with what's happening with charges on space-based ADS-B and some other things out there that just kind of go and show you that it would not have been smart to go down that path. And I think that we have leadership within the FAA now, from Administrator Dixon on down, that they have their own personal opinions on it, and we all know where the administrator came from, and they were not a fan of privatization. And he's leading the agency. We think that the White House is off of that kick, and our job is to not only educate this administration, but if there is a change in administration, it starts over again to make sure that they realize how valuable this industry is and don't do harm to things that are working. And I think through this whole process also with the government shutdown last year, people got a real appreciation for the sacrifices that the men and women and the National Air Traffic Control Association and all that workforce did to be able to work through the shutdown without getting paid. And it was really that pressure on that system that caused us to end the shutdown. So they are extremely important. And why would you want to give up that tremendous national resource that is able to do things that people in other parts of the world cannot do? People that ever question the FAA's leadership only have to look to what we've been able to do with simultaneous approaches to runways, to get our ADS-B mandate out there, to have the approaches that we're now scratching the surface and employing Datacom to be able to work that. We are the envy of the world in being able to handle the amount of traffic and the amount of product that's being pumped to North America out there. No one else can do that, and we need to appreciate it. And I know Administrator Dixon, they said that one of his primary 4 pillars that the FAA is moving forward in this next year is global leadership, because they need to talk more about it. Thank you. Bill, I think you had a question.
It seems like two things are happening simultaneously. The FAA, as you said, as all of you said, is intimately involved with certification on so many levels. They're vital to the process. And yet, there's a labor shortage, and we're not attracting the numbers of people, skilled people, dedicated people that we want. How does that impact FAA going forward?
They're very concerned about it. And in fact, a friend of ours, Kate Lang, was brought back. She ran the Brussels office, 6 years, I think? Kate was over there. Administrator Dixon put Kate in charge of developing the workforce for the FAA, which is so important to us, because we've got to not only fill our workforce, but we've got to help the FAA recruit the right folks. And one thing I saw on a recent trip out to California to a lot of our companies that are working in this new electric propulsion world is the FAA is there alongside of them learning, and it's young people. And we don't have enough of them, but I do think that this new era of aviation that we're going to, and Michael and I had this discussion because we know his company, among other traditional OEMs, are really jumping into this space. And the amount of opportunity that we have using that to start attracting people that say, okay, you know, think about it. They aren't old enough to remember the Jetsons, but it does jazz them when you think about the ability of what we can do in cities and start to move people in the not too distant future. I don't know, Michael, do you want to add to that?
I think you did a great job. I think, Bill, the focal point is recognizing that we're all in this together. It's a one industry kind of point of view. I think the associations are clearly coming together to do that. I think us and the FAA are doing it. I think all the OEMs are trying to take an initiative that's trying to draw attention to the need to bring talent here. And I think the technologies is what's driving it. When you looked at the aviation interest in the past, it was mainly about flight, become a pilot. And now I think we have to have a broader reach and have it be much more about destination, technology, how it connects to the social things that the millennials and then generations to come will start to have a greater interest around aviation and what aviation does for them. And I think that's the kind of bond narrative that we have to put together to attract those individuals to the industry.
And this Aviation Works for You is focused, and it's got different panels. You can be a controller. You can go and in addition, the military is interested in partnering with it so that you can also be part of their great contributions to aerospace. But we're adding panels for you can manufacture, you can maintain. So there's so many elements to that, and that's why I think that's growing, because we all see that if we pool our resources, we're more effective. Jack was an early entrant into that with EAA, partnering with ALPA. So I think we have a real good growing sense of how important this is, and we're all military, so defense, commercial, business, and general aviation, we're all in this together, and we got to work this issue hard. Anything else? Tom. By the way, Tom, I want to stop you because I didn't see you back there. I wanted to acknowledge AOPA has been a tremendous partner with us also on the economic impact study, and I was looking for you and I couldn't see you, so sorry about that, buddy.
That's okay, thanks. We're happy to support it because it is great information that we can all use in our outreach to educate the general public about what's happening in general aviation. But I wanted to ask you, you mentioned about the FAA, being at the FAA and certification oversight. And I'm wondering, what do you hear from inside the agency? I know there's been some hearings, of course, but how much are they willing to push back and against Congress and others who are rattling sabers about this idea of much more oversight? Are they doing a good job of educating them, and what do they think is going to happen as a result?
Well, I think they're somewhat hamstrung by any time that they go and perhaps try to put things in context. All of a sudden there's this mainstream media or folks on the Hill that will grab a headline and take it out of context, where the leadership there in the FAA knows that it is because of the process that they've used that on the commercial side, we have only had one fatality in 10 years. I mean, can you imagine that? Just the number of engines of Brads that are spinning at thousands of RPM out there and how many cycles it is, it's just phenomenal that we can have that safety record. And we all know in general in business aviation, we're getting safer all the time. We also know that we had a tragedy out in California recently with a rotorcraft accident, and we know that we have the technology available today that can't get, and we don't know the cause of the accident, but with automation, we can make systems safer. And so it's our job to help the FAA educate the Congress. And pushback is not as much as I'm perceiving it that the Congress truly wants to work with us to understand what things that they could offer will build on what they have given us from legislation. So Brad talked about safety management systems. They were mandated on the operator community to great success. They have not been mandated for us as manufacturers or for maintenance organizations, because you have to do a cost-benefit analysis to pass through all the wickets that you have to do to make it get through OMB. Well, you can't, how do you quantify that safety thing? So it may take Congress to be able to say to the Department of Transportation, we don't care about the cost-benefit analysis. We want you to do that because we see benefit to safety. And so if that happens, one, I think we're getting ahead of the curve also in conjunction with the FAA, because not only are we starting to adopt safety management systems, and Brad and some of the companies have been recognized, but we have international standards agreed to with ASD, our AIA counterpart in Europe, so we have these standards already developed that people can start to adopt, but the FAA itself is expanding their safety management systems within the agency there. So we want to be able to talk to Congress about that. Want to talk also about the complexities of the interface between the human and the automation. A lot of people have been couching that under human factors. It is, but it's really that fine point, that nexus of what kind of information are we providing to the man or woman that's in that physical loop there about what the automation is doing, and when it's not functioning correctly, what are the right cues that we give them. And figuring this out is very important. If you take a look at each one of the JATR report, the joint report that we have that Chris Hart led, which was an international group, and you look at the special committee that Lee Moak and Darren McDew led, they came with a lot of great suggestions on what we can implement, and we're already working with FAA to bin them into what type of rulemaking we can do, but also both of those reports, as I said earlier, really talk about the importance of delegation for the safety in the process. So it's a great issue, and again, we'll have people available to talk about it beforehand. And I think we got time for one more question. Yes, sir.
Dave Hughes, I'm an aviation writer, and I wondered how you relate to the drone industry, which has got explosive growth. It's soaking up technicians, talent, airspace, FAA time, and causing them to rethink how they regulate in a very restrictive way that EAA and others are afraid might spill over into manned aviation.
Well, I would suggest, I'm not going to speak for Jack, but I would suggest that we're all embracing the UAS community, because there's now, if you saw recently, Jay Merkel, who is in charge of UAS at the FAA, Ali Barami, the head of safety, has said, Jay, you're going to be one of my executive agents for urban air mobility. So now we're talking about vehicles that have people on board. Now, why did he do that? Because UAS, that community has been successful. Now, nothing happens as quick as anybody wants, but if you really think about where we are today, they're allowing 135 operations beyond line of sight. We're starting to stretch out. The vehicles are starting to get bigger and bigger. We're understanding the technology, and that then we can filter into manned aviation. And our whole point is integration. We don't want segregation. We want to be able to safely integrate this. Things that we can't see with our eyes, we can augment electronically. So we see great future to be able to go and take this incredible aviation system, which is one reason why we don't want to privatize it, because there's so many users. Commercial space, another user. You look at the number of spaceports just populating the country, it's phenomenal, and the growth. But we're going to be able to safely do that if we work with our partners at the FAA, and they're very eager to work with us. So back to that UAS office, they have been the ones that have been able to look not only at certification flight standards, but then reach out to the Air Traffic Control Organization and bring them in. And now we got to bring airports into this process to get everyone talking to be able to frame that. Ali Barami is holding his, I think it'll be his third annual Urban Air Mobility Roundtable for us to start getting down and now move beyond talking about certification, but actually talking about operational standards. We're also doing the same thing with EASA on the other side, and in fact, this morning they told us that they're trying to get together and look at operational standards, and can we make that common across the ocean. And we just produced a paper that talks about training this new pilot force for these vehicles. So there's great opportunity and great effort going on in that area. So, okay, one more.
I'm Charlie Leoka, and I'm with Travelers United. And Charlie Leoka, I'm with Travelers United. And I just would like to encourage the group here to also look beyond just the aviation industry and the stakeholders there, but look also at consumers, because we weren't on your side in terms of air traffic control, but we lost that, okay. But in terms of noise, in terms of carbon footprint, in terms of safety, in terms of rebuilding confidence in the FAA, in terms of certification issues, in terms of compliance issues. These are areas where we all walk hand in hand together with you. And I think that we can be a big help as not only from GAMA's point of view, but from the industry's point of view as we move forward. Because it's something which is really, it helps everyone. And specifically, when we talk about carbon footprint and noise, the environmental issues, I mean, I work every day and I talk with people from the National Defense or the Environmental Defense Fund, from Friends of the Earth and so on. And finally, I've got them realizing that the economic world and the incentives that economics provide are even more important than what a regulation could give us. Because every penny that the government or that the industry saves goes right to the bottom line. And, you know, it's even better than having a regulation. So, but those kind of discussions need to be able to be continued. And I just really urge you guys to work with consumers as well as, and consumer representatives, as well as with the industry.
Thank you, and I couldn't agree more, and our ambassadors for that is our aviation press that can help us reach out there. So I appreciate that. So I want to just wrap up in talking that Dave mentioned this is our 50th anniversary. So back in 1970, a group of companies got together and we were 11 strong. They left a portion of them had their AIA memberships, but they wanted to focus just on general aviation. And now here we are today in 2020 with over 110 members in all aspects. We are obviously an international global association, but also have with us our great teams from our maintenance, repair, and overhaul side of the house, rotorcraft, fixed wing, service providers, and our theme that not only our communications committee put forward is we don't want to look back. We want to look forward. And so I talked to my buddies here in the other associations, and we're going to adopt this future-ready theme for this compendium that we're going to come out, because this industry is future-ready. All of these issues that these gentlemen talked about earlier today are all things that we are preparing for an incredible future. And this next decade is going to be one of, I think, the most exciting, again, since the dawn of the jet age. So I'm very excited to not only work with our member companies, but also our sister associations, both here and over in Europe and in other parts of the world, and our regulators, to be able to go and unleash the potential of this industry and find the workforce that can go and propel us forward. So we're very excited about that. And then my last item going off the stage is talking about a very important event that we have coming up here in just a few weeks. And this is the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. Now, we at GAMA are very involved in conjunction with our 50th anniversary to support this effort. And myself, along with my colleagues John Cudahy from the International Council of Air Shows, Hank Coates from the Commemorative Air Force, Mike Ginter as our air boss, as well as our partner Paul Rinaldi from National Air Traffic Controllers Association, to be able to work on what we call the AOD, the Arsenal of Democracy bookend of these events, which is May 8th, 2020, right here in Washington, D.C. We have 56 aircraft in 2015. We're going to have about 100 coming up this time. We're excited that today we're opening up seats for our big gala. Our Signature Technicare is our host down at National Airport on May 7th, the evening of May 7th, for a huge gala. Those of you that watched the Super Bowl or watched the State of the Union saw Charles McGee out there flipping the coin and also accepting a lot of praise from a grateful nation. He will be with us. Several aces, incredible people that went and flew some of the largest missions in World War II, and also a representative that helped the restoration of dock that actually did the riveting on the original dock back in 1944 and 45 in the plant in Wichita. So I'm extremely excited about that. We've got the services Skip Lehman here from Mach 2 Management that's helping us put on a lot of the gala there. We're partners not only with the World War II Memorial, and that event starts at 10 a.m. on May 8th. The flyover will commence at 11:30. Is our first time hitting the Lincoln Memorial and then coming down Independence Avenue. And then once that flyover is complete, then activity moves down to the Eisenhower Memorial for the dedication there. So we've got several aircraft in the formation that will be dedicated not only to President Eisenhower, General Eisenhower, but also to our recently departed President Bush, and we have a formation for him. So after this conference, we have press packets available. I will have my partners with the Arsenal of Democracy available to speak with the aviation press to give you more detail. Also, the Smithsonian Institution is our partners, and what I'm really excited about, getting back to the discussion that we had on STEM and workforces, our Airline Pilots Association, in conjunction with our sister associations, we're launching a STEM effort to take place in conjunction with the Arsenal of Democracies that'll take place not only in the mall here, but out at the Udvar-Hazy facility. Last time when we did this in 2015 is the biggest day they had ever. National Air and Space Museum, and then also out at our staging base at Manassas in Virginia. So our companies are going to participate with that to try to bring in young people. And then we have an online component about this that we will live stream content, and the Pentagon is our partners with that effort along with the Commemorative Air Force. So I'm very excited about what we can do to talk about technology that happened, that was spurred by this incredibly destructive war, but really what it did is it launched our industry, and we're going to talk about that and talk about our future in conjunction with celebrating the 75th. So we hope that you'll go and talk to my partners when this is complete. So again, thank you for coming, and thank you very much for my colleagues and panelists and members here.
Thanks, Pete.
Great, thank you.
Good job.